We're going to continue market segmentation as we have been doing in class. And so I'm just going to share my screen. And so as you know, we have already started the topic of STP, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So let's just have a quick flick over the slides. So this is the main, the list of topics within what we're going to cover for the module. We went down through introduction, definitions, benefits, and so on. We looked at evaluating segment attractiveness and the questions that need to be asked in formulating that decision process of which segment and should we go for, and should we actually go for this segment or not. We looked at this table. Then once we've gone through the various questions, we can categorize things according to each market, according to our ability to serve that market on the vertical axis, and the segment attractiveness on the horizontal. So if you think of this as a graph, for those of you who like mathsy things, some points will end up you know, in the top left, and the more attractive markets end up down in the bottom right hand side. So the prime target that we should start with, if we're looking for a single segment to start with, would be the segment is attractive for various reasons, and we know our ability to serve that market is strong. So we moved on to looking at differentiated versus concentrated and undifferentiated markets and so on. And so we moved on then discussing how do we decide on what basis to divide up the segments. So we get the concept that there is an entire population of potential bicycle purchasers if we're in this market of selling bicycles. How do we divide up? How do we decide what way these segments will be divided? So we're going to go down through a lot of those options, but typically it's not just one basis, it's multiple bases, bases being plural of basis. And we can have a primary or a secondary segmentation variable. So we're going to look at some now, and we're going to start with social class and social status. So as we discussed in the last class, some roles are seen as inferior or inferior. There's a power difference. So parent and child, employer, employee, and so on. Lecturer, student is another one, similar to the employer-employee dynamic. And if that's news to you, then you know that's the way you should be treating that relationship. So marketing has to take into account the extent of status awareness. Low status individuals in a status conscious society may aspire to achieve higher status. And so then products can be aimed at or positioned. This is probably the first use or introduction of the P of our STP, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So we position products. We're talking about in the mind, presenting something for sale, but in the mind of the customer, putting it in a frame of reference, and that's positioning. So products can be positioned and sold to some customers who aspire to the next class up. So these products can help them feel like they are already part of that class. So sometimes maybe Hermes handbags or Rolex watches, those kinds of things are often marketed to people who theoretically probably can't afford them. It's a big saving. It's a major expenditure for that individual, but it makes them feel like they've made it. They feel like they've achieved something that they, and that's, we're not judging here. We're marketers. If that makes them feel good, it satisfies a need for them to feel that they are part of that higher class in that sense. And, and that's why if you look on daft.ie or other home house selling websites, the ads that may appear beside the $1 million, €1 million houses plus the ads change if it's a big if there's a big lotto jackpot coming up. The ads beside those houses are targeted at people who are daydreaming. They're the people who are looking at those houses on those particular days. Those websites will tell you they get a spike in viewings, online tracking on the days when there is a high jackpot about to be won. And that is clearly people who've bought a ticket and they are daydreaming, if I won, this is the house I would buy. So there are products being advertised there, in the right-hand column that are targeting those people. Well, you can't have that house unless you do actually win that lotto, but maybe you could save up and buy this X product, which is something associated with those class of people. So that's a classic. And that is why, as marketers, we want to know about social class. As I said, we're not doing these studies. We're not doing the segmentation, dividing people up for any judgmental reason. It's purely to group people according to the products they might want, the needs that they want to have satisfied, and so on, and for us to serve those needs. So sometimes, it can be tricky, especially when we're talking about subjects like this, because we are following stereotypes to a large degree. So in old-fashioned grades of dividing up workers or social grades according to work was just two classifications originally, blue collar and white collar. And that basically the lower classes, the working classes, were denoted as blue collar workers, and the middle and upper classes were considered, so the managers and so on, the organizers, the directors, all that sort of thing, were considered white collar. And it comes from a very old-fashioned view on things. White collar, literally, you traditionally, well, it would have been men in those days, were wearing white shirts with their suits, so you can see the white collar from all angles. Whereas men who were working in other jobs, anything but a managerial job, they were wearing blue overalls that obviously had the blue collar. So that's where it's the blue collar of the overalls versus the shirt in a suit type job. And it was a very black and white view of the world. And so naturally, as the decades went on, classifications got a little bit more sophisticated. And so we've got, you can see different columns here. So the on the left, we've got the registered generals social classes. These would be quite widely used and well known. And a further definition slightly, after that, the doesn't roll off the tongue, JICNAR social grades. And so the first ones, the registered generals, as you can see, are in Roman numerals from 1 to 5, and the JIC and AR social grades are from A to E. In both cases, they have 5 classifications. In both cases, one of those has been subdivided. So we'll just quickly have a look. So at the very top, we've got the how we might describe as the upper middle class. So that is the number 1 or A grade in those classifications, and the occupations typically, obviously these are all averages and so on. These are typical. Higher managerial, professional, and so on, like lawyers, high earners, directors of companies, CEOs, all of that kind of thing. So as we saw earlier, if I just flick back to a slide here, so in the stratifications, in that layering of who goes into what level, things that come into play to move you either up or down is the level of wealth or income. So some people are just born into money and automatically reside in the upper classes, and it doesn't matter what they do for a living. Some people will reach a level of educational attainment that will move them up a level regardless of what they earn or own. And then specific occupations have higher class distinction as well. So those 3 elements are what decides an individual's class to which they belong. So next we move on to B or 2, middle classes. Excuse me. And this is intermediate managerial. So we had the upper managerial and professional and so on in the previous one. So middle management is what intermediate managerial or administrative professionals. So teachers, managers, very old-fashioned term of computer operators. So obviously developers and that kind of thing. Sales managers. So in the people who are sort of in the kind of mid stage of their career in an already professional occupation would occupy that level. And then, these are still decades old classifications, so just kind of bear with the terminology and so on. So the next one in both cases is subdivided. So we've got the 3 A and B, and we've got C1 and 2 for the lower middle class or skilled working class. So they roughly, be very similar to each other, and separate to the others. So they're more similar to each other, this C1 and C2 or 3A and B, than they would be to the next one up or the next one down. So in the lower middle class, we've got supervisory, clerical, junior managerial, administrative, and so on, professional. So people who've reached the upper end of professions or jobs. Professions is actually less general than just careers. People in non-professional careers who've reached the pinnacle, so foreman on a building site and so on would be included in there. Skilled working class, so anything that requires a level of training to get to the point. So obviously electricians and mechanics and so on would be in there. And next down, then we have working class, which is a very wide term, semi-skilled manual labor. So something that requires some training, but not extensive, like apprenticeship type training. Such the electricians go through it these days. It's a degree level apprenticeship program. And so we'll see in a second how things have evolved a little bit more even from this. So the working class, the two systems, the old-fashioned systems, they still agree on the working class. That's the kind of semi-skilled. And then it's slightly different. Then the bottom division is classed as 5 on the Register General, and that includes unskilled manual labor. So you don't need training beyond obviously being shown where to find things, and maybe a barista being shown how to turn on the machine and press which button to do what. Very minimal. Where if the training can be done in a day, it's not official training as such. It's unskilled. Cleaning, waiting tables, all the kind of jobs that most people do through college, as I have done myself. But in the JICNAR, the final class distinction is slightly different, and it's recognizing the lowest level of subsistence. So it means just to subside means to just get by in terms of how the money that you're living on, being able to, the rent going out and food and bills, you're just about getting by with the money that you're earning. So that is subsistence level. So that would include, and it's updated from the previous one to take into account that sort of, state pensioners, people who, state pensioners is defined by people who don't have their own private pension. They rely on getting the pension from the state. Widows, where there's no other earner in the household, casual workers. So by casual, it means not full time. So they may not, they're on hourly basis workers. So again, all the jobs that we do or did to get us through college are typically in those lower levels. But what we see our role, and certainly I see my role here, and I do refer to the interview situation and getting you onto that graduate job. Our role, we're trying to get you guys and catapult you from doing whatever jobs you're doing currently to get through college. Once you graduate, to catapult you up hopefully into some of these C1 and so on, and hopefully then with a view to moving upwards. The sky is the limit if it's down to choices you make. Now, and a further update on the social classes expanded. As you can see, we've got 7 levels, and level 1 has 3 subdivisions in it. So it's further moving with the times a little bit and taking more into account in these. And, I'm going to keep saying it, it isn't meant to be judgmental. It's just meant to understand our customers better, understand what is important to them, what their budget might be, whether or not, maybe they want no frills to be as cheap as possible and so on. And that's, why we do this. So it, as I said, goes from 1 to 7. 1 is subdivided into 3. So now at the very top, we've got higher managerial and professional occupations. So the definition of a professional occupation is the higher end, something that not just needs a degree, but needs further qualifications as a minimum, to start on the career ladder. So then the next division is employers and managers in large organizations. So the employer, whether they're in there or lower down, is all to do with money. As how many they employ, how much is the business worth, how much are they earning from that business, and so on. And if it is quite a lot, then they get up there. If it's not that much, they're down here. Okay. So employers, managers in large organizations, so bank managers fall into that, company directors and so on. Higher professional, so doctors, lawyers, and so on. So once they join their career path, they're catapulted in there sometimes. Next down, lower managerial and professional occupations. So other occupations, other professional occupations, the ones that are not automatically going into class 1 are in here. Police officers is given as an example. It is an American. It was devised in America, but applicable in Europe and so on, Western world as well. Many professions in there. Far more here than up here. It's a very, very elite few higher professionals up there. Most would fall into number 2 or 3. So intermediate occupations, PAs, secretaries, clerical workers. So kind of going in at the bottom level of a job, office work, admin staff in the civil service, all those kinds of jobs, the kind of the entry level sometimes. When you graduate, typically, you will start here, hopefully, as I said, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to catapult you from perhaps level 7 straight into level 3. Where you go from there is your choice. Every time you do a CA, every time you do an exam, and the effort you put into it, you're making a decision on how high up this ladder you go. You know, to get those good graduate jobs, those companies are looking for transcripts, not just a good degree. Everyone is coming out with a good degree. They want to see consistent work. And in order to get that good degree, you have to get into next year. You have to, in order to do well next year, you have to understand those modules very well. What will help you understand next year's modules better is doing well in this year's modules. They build on each other. If you're just scraping by one module just to get into next year, scraping through, you're just making life difficult for yourself. And I'm really trying to get you guys to learn lessons that perhaps took me, you know, my whole degree, my first degree to learn. Fourth year was my easiest year in my undergrad because I finally copped on to working in advance, you know, getting stuff done ahead of deadlines, you know, chipping away at stuff, you know, just consistent work throughout the year. And if you get a good study group, get a good team together for CAs and so on, it can be enjoyable too. I mean, it's still work, but you know, it doesn't have to be a pain. So yeah, it goes all the way down to routine occupations. So these are the hourly paid workers and so on. At the bottom, obviously car park attendants wouldn't be a common job description in Ireland, but you know, as I said, it's an American, came out of an American study. And but it's all those hourly paid people who are not full-time, and so you know it can live in hand to mouth scraping by, and it would include similar levels to the previous one of the subsistence as well, those on social welfare and that kind of thing. So social mobility. So why are we learning all of this? Let's bring it back to marketing. What's the whole point? Social mobility is the tendency or the idea that individuals want to move, or they move within social hierarchy. Generally, such movement is associated with economic, educational, or occupational success. So upward mobility, when you get promotions and so on, the next promotion might bring you into a higher level. The money that you're earning, the wealth that you have in terms of maybe, they're talking about the number of millionaires these days because of the price of property and so on. So downward mobility, it's a bit insulting to say failure because, as I said, it's sometimes a choice in terms of, every time you decide not to go for an A, not to push for that, the best marks that you can get in every exam, you are in fact making a decision on where you want to land on this table. It starts now. It's happening all the time. It's not just magic that puts people up here in these higher managerial positions and so on, higher professional. It's choices, day to day, little choices all the way along, how much effort you want to put in and how much effort you want to put in day to day in a job. Some of those high-end top jobs that earn well into the six figures may require you to work 12-hour days or more. And, I certainly don't want to do that for, the rest of my life. So I make a decision. That's not where I want to be. So it's not necessarily a failure, but choices. And you make that choice. So you can decide today, yeah, okay, I want to rise and see how far I can get. So it starts with the CAs, then it's the exams, then it's the next CAs, the next exams. Each one is a decision, and each one is a step towards getting that good degree, getting into next year, and so on. So, as I mentioned before, back to the slide, people aspire to upward mobility, and they will exhibit purchase and consumption patterns suitable to the class to which they aspire. So lower classes will become less significant proportion of the population as people move out of them, but that implies that everybody is constantly moving up. Some people are making choices and so on that end up moving down. So there is a constant cycle, and then new people are joining, usually at the bottom. When we leave home and we join the world, when you first appear on this table is when you leave home and you're on your own 2 feet. Often we start at the bottom or somewhere close to the bottom, and you have to work your way up. This is the literal thing that people are talking about when they say you're working your way up. But some people envy what some of the upper classes have and do, and they will, if they are in the 2s and 3s and 4s, maybe they want to own something or do something, maybe skiing, for instance, that the those higher classes do. So each social class shares a number of specific lifestyle factors. So their attitude to life and so on, their values, the activities that they do. I mentioned skiing and so on. These distinguish them from members of other classes. And that's the essence of why we grouped them together like this. It's not applicable for every product, but we should know when we're looking at our product, what's appropriate for us. So in particular, social class has been found to correlate with the following: tastes in clothes and fashion. So we typically, often accidentally or otherwise, wear similar clothes to other people that are in the same position in life as us, and same class or whatever, our peers, people we spend time with. It's infectious. It may not be a conscious decision, but that just happens. But what often happens as well is that we actively don't buy the type of clothes that are worn by people in a class we do not want to be associated with. So if you consider certain clothes are what snobs wear, you won't wear those brands. If you think that people are trashy who wear certain things, so there is a convergence in the type of thing that in each level they might wear. Obviously, the budget comes into play as well. Home decoration, then the same idea, leisure activities and money management. So whether or not we're looking for pensions or mortgages and so on, credit cards, the consumption of those, they are products. So family life cycle is another way we can classify our customers, and that's separate to social class and so on. We can look at them together and correlate things because sometimes they can go hand in hand, and we'll see that in a second. So the concept of family life cycle is based on the idea that the structure, membership and lifestyle of a family can change over time with the age of the individual members. Excuse me. So again, we've got a more old-fashioned version and an extended, newer version. Excuse me. Simply called the 9-stage FLC is family life cycle, or a 5-stage family life cycle. So we look at the first couple. So bachelorhood, same on both sides. This is again. This is the first time you appear on this table as your own entity, is when you leave home. Before that point, you are within your parents' family and you dictate where they are on this table. So you enter bachelorhood, and that is not gender specific. It is whether it's a male or female entering, presumed to be single, in terms of financial assistance and all, the sort of bigger commitments and so on. And then at some point after that, the next step is newly married couples. So people get together and they form a household together. Whether it's and honeymooners is the older term for that. It doesn't matter if these people are officially married. It's when they have made some kind of life commitment to be together and to kind of have a household together and not just living together in some kind of temporary boyfriend girlfriend thing or insert other. Next stage is when kids start happening. Obviously, just like in the other table, not everybody moves through all the stages. So it's kind of looking at averages, and a lot of people will move through some or all of these stages. Some people will not. So some people, so if the couple end up having children, then at the start of that, on the 5-stage system, it's just called parenthood, full nest, when all the kids are there, and until in 5-stage, it's that parenthood until the last child has left home. In the newer version, there are 3 versions, 3 stages of full nest, and obviously it's the full nest 1 is when all the kids are young, and then full nest 2, they're at the kind of mid stage, or some of them maybe they're spread across. So full nest 1 is the start of having kids, having preschoolers and so on, perhaps starting national school and so on. Full nest 2, they're progressing through the school system. Perhaps some of them are starting to leave home, but mainly they're just in the school system. They're in that mid national school / secondary school. And then the full nest 3 is typically when they're at the end of their schooling, so mostly in secondary, and perhaps some moving on into college and so on. It hasn't been updated for the new phenomenon of people living from living at home well into their 20s and so on. So they would officially be in the bachelorhood even if they're still at home. So the full nest 3 is when they start moving off to college and so on, or work, moving out. And then when all the kids have left home is when empty nest starts. So the last child has left is empty nest 1. And in the first stage, people are living longer now. And so splitting this off, so in the old system, it was just one stage of empty nest, and this has been subdivided into 2, noticing that or reflecting the reality in society, in certainly the Western world, that there could be a very long period of time when both parents are still alive and perhaps becoming grandparents. So the kids are long left, and it's the later stage of their retirement and so on. And then unfortunately at some point, when one of the pair dies, then the person who is left behind is denoted as the solitary survivor. And again, this has been split into 2 phases, again denoting and recognizing, reflecting that sometimes a widow or widower can survive for a very long time on their own. And so the solitary survivor 1 and solitary survivor 2 denote that. Whereas in the old-fashioned system, it was just called dissolution, because as per marriage vows, death separates them. Okay, so in this, apologies for the size of it. I might make it a little bit bigger. Let me see. And oh, that's not gonna work. Oh yeah, okay. So, well, it's slightly bigger. No, do you know what? Okay, so you can see along the top, they are the descriptions that I've just gone through. And the 9 stages, so all up to the solitary survivors. But what we now have underneath are examples, and examples bringing it back to marketing. Why are we learning this? What is the whole point of classifying people according to these family life cycle stages? So I'm not going to read all through the whole slide. I'm just going to kind of rock around. So let's have a look at first bachelorhood, because most of you are probably in that stage. So young single people not living at home. That's the official definition. So this is the first time people move out, few financial burdens. So there's no mortgage, there's no, usually, again, this is not always the case, but there's no big loans, and there's no big, there might be student loans, but there's no dependents, no mortgage, that kind of thing. These people are interested in fashion, and they are opinion leader or fashion leader led. That means they look to people they admire, celebrities or influencers of some kind, to follow trends that they're following, and people they want to emulate, and they will wear their brands if they're promoting stuff. Recreation oriented, again, they don't have big demands on their time. They have work and can have lots of hobbies because there's no little kids and so on, no big commitments. Their parents probably are still healthy and or on average alive. So the things they buy are basic. So they're starting off perhaps in rental accommodation. So they buy basic kitchen equipment, whatever is not provided already, basic furniture. They might buy shelves or something. The minimum to do what they need to do and get by. These are not the things they want to spend a lot of their money on. They want to spend money on having a good time. So they experiment. Equipment. I hate a very old-fashioned phrase, equipment for the mating game. So, basically it's fashion, makeup, hygiene and healthcare, beauty products, that sort of thing, holidays, you know, hedonistic would be how they would be described. So they spend their money on things that are pleasurable. They have a good time. They go to festivals. They go to music gigs, and they're willing. That's where they want to spend their money. They're not spending their money, doing up a house or anything like that. Let's skip to the middle where we've got, let's say, full nest 3. So the end stage, they're an older couple than obviously when they started out. They have kids that are probably nearly at the point where they're starting to go to college, or maybe the first ones have left, if there's a lot of kids. If there's only 1 or 2, they probably haven't left yet. Financial position of the couple is usually very stable. They've progressed in their careers, so the passing of time moves across from left to right. Just like sometimes in the social strata, passage of time can go upwards, although it can kind of fluctuate at some levels. But this obviously denotes a passage of time. It is a linear thing. Typically, there are exceptions to everything. So with this middle stage, the couple, their mortgage is much easier to support because it was agreed perhaps a decade ago and is mostly paid off, perhaps, or part way paid off. And as I said, the couple have progressed a lot in their careers at this point. If wives had taken time off, or partners had taken time off while having kids, they're perhaps likely to be back in work again, resuming careers and more money as a result coming into the house again. The household is dominated by the activities of the kids. They're doing junior cert, they're doing their leaving cert, and it's all about their schooling and and all that entails their piano lessons or whatever, GA training. And so maybe some of their kids are getting little part-time jobs and so on. Some of them might have started college, as we said, if there's a lot of kids. And the money is focused on, and the saving is focused on the kids' going to college. So supporting the kids, getting ready to support the kids, or currently the first kids maybe in college, and everything that all the costs that are involved in that. And skip ahead to the last stage, solitary survivor retired. So that's the 1 and 2 of solitary survivors. Sometimes people are widowed, unfortunately, earlier in life. They may not have retired, so that is the first stage. And then perhaps, as they're much older and in their elderly years, there are different things at play with those people, different concerns, different money worries, and so on. So there is a significant drop in income because these people are retired. Maybe the person who has died was the earner, and that money is no longer coming in, and the pension that is being received would be typically significantly less. It would have been perhaps a certain proportion of the original, and so it's a big drop. There are additional medical needs typically as we get older. If we're lucky enough to get to this point, a lot of things are going to start going wrong, and so more attention is needed, more help is needed when people are at this position, and security. People who are in this category are more vulnerable and need to be looked after. They may need sheltered accommodation. So what we're talking there is a nursing home if their needs are medical and other needs are greater than, well, not than the average, but of in keeping with the stage. That may be or home help and so on, other alternatives. But either wherever it comes from, people typically need help, and that's the consumption that that is important to them. So these people are not interested in spending money going out to the pub. If we remember back to the bachelorhood people, they're recreation oriented. So that's where their money goes. That's what they want to spend on. When we're at the last stage in our hopefully a very long time away, it's all about the medical needs, the survival needs, the needs for security and so on. Just the safety element of just living alone might be enough for some people to want to move either in with their kids or into a nursing home and so on. And possible dependence on others for personal, financial management and control. So some people will have a mental deterioration. They could Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia, and they may not be able to advocate for themselves, and so again they need support and help in that way, and perhaps need family members to step up and take over their finances or take over their decision making of their medical needs and so on. Okay, so that's family life cycle. So that's another base that we could use to a basis for segmentation. Moving on to, whoops, we'll make that smaller again. Let's back to normal. Psychographics then is a form of consumer research which builds up a psychological profile of our customers in general or a particular product. So it's the main basis of psychological segmentation of a market and appropriate product positioning, and we can refer to it as lifestyle analysis, it's often called, or sometimes AIO analysis, and it may not trip off the tongue too easily, but that stands for activities, interests, and opinions. And you do come across AIO an awful lot in the marketing literature. If you're reading textbooks, it may or may not be expanded and explained. So now you know. So Psychographic segmentation seeks to classify people according to their values, opinions, personality characteristics, or interests, all that sort of thing. In a competitive world where innovation is key, so depending on what kind of products we are selling, for improved organizational performance, a system able to introduce new perspectives is worthy of investigation. So what that means is just because we haven't previously segmented using psychographics doesn't mean we should keep doing it the way we've always done it. And it could be something that you could take on board and use alongside traditional segmentation bases. So segmentation, lifestyle segmentation fits this criterion because it deals with the person as opposed to the product. So we're always all about understanding our customer. If we can understand our customer better than the competition, we can satisfy their needs better than the competition and therefore have a competitive advantage. So when we talk about lifestyle, we mean the distinctive ways of living adopted by particular communities or subsections of society. Lifestyle is a manifestation of a number of behavioral factors such as motivation, personality, and culture, and it depends on accurate description. So we need to gather that information. We need to have access to that information if this is going to be a way that we segment. In marketing terms, lifestyles can be generalized into 4 categories: upwardly mobile or ambitious, traditional and sociable, security and status seeking, or hedonistic preference. So before I move on that, I think most of them are self-explanatory. So just to explain hedonistic preference, hedonism is the pursuit of pleasure. So doing things because you like doing them is hedonistic. It's not a bad word. It's just, when we looked at the bachelorhood stage, where people are typically focused on recreation, they want to spend their money going out on nights out, going for dinners, going to gigs or festivals, holidays, all of those, everything in there it's for pleasure. It's not to get your kids into college. It's not, for some other purpose. And yeah, so the ones in the bachelor lifestyle would match up closely, would align mostly with this classification as well. Now, culture, to get on the same page and define it, knowledge of shared beliefs and artifacts of a society that are clearly of value to marketers who can adapt their products and appeals accordingly and be fairly sure of a sizable market. Culture is deeply embedded in everyday behavior, but it's susceptible to measurement to some extent. So how can we measure culture in terms of what we want to know for our product? Well, we can do attitude measurement techniques, projective techniques. So that would include in-depth interviews, focus group sessions, and so on. We can look at content analysis. We can do observation analysis. Some of you, for your assessments, we're doing observations where you're looking at 50 videos on YouTube and so on. Surveys or value inventories. So that is psychographics, and that is segmenting. That concludes segmenting consumer markets. So next I will look at industrial markets, and I'll just close this off for now.